Powell had a long struggle with cancer. Though fully vaccinated, his family says he died of COVID-19 complications, at risk with a breakthrough infection.
Powell died of complications from COVID-19, linked to a type of cancer that suppresses the immune system. He was fully vaccinated.
General Powell represented our most vulnerable population in this country. He was over the age of 80. He had cancer, and the treatment for his cancer made him vulnerable.
Even his full vaccine series might not have mounted enough of an antibody response. And it just is a reminder that if you are multiple chronic conditions and you have them just like the general did, that you are at high risk.
A stark reminder that amid all the gains made in the U.S. as cases slowly drop, the losses at the hands of this pandemic continue to mount.
This is causing anti-vaxxers to come out of the woodwork and say Powell was vaccinated and he died, meaning the vaccine doesn't work. Why bother and get the vaccine? And it is coming at a time where we are really wondering what is the future of this pandemic. So,
news of Colin Powell's death breaking about 8 this morning, and within minutes over at the Fox Propaganda Network, they were saying this.
There will be many conversations in the wake of this death. There will be honoring this man, this public servant, this human being who was a professional soldier for 35 years. We can reflect on his life, and we should. There will also be conversations about the fact that he was fully vaccinated, according to his family, and he died from complications from COVID.
Minutes, literally minutes after we learned of the death of a man who devoted his life to serving this country, minutes later, already disgracefully using his death to raise questions about vaccines. That wasn't the end of it. It goes on.
We're seeing data from Europe, from the United Kingdom, that fully vaccinated people are being hospitalized and fully vaccinated people are dying from COVID. And here we have a very high-profile example that is going to require more truth from our government, from our health leaders as well, as we talk about this story on a day when state after state and institution after institution are pushing mandates for vaccination.
Seriously? I guess. Some people never learn, don't know any better. I don't know. Don't have the chops. I don't know what it is. Like just with a natural instinct not to do something like that. It seems like, any decent human being would know. You just don't. At least that's how my mama raised me. The man had just died, and this guy can't wait to make it into a fight about vaccine mandates. It is disgraceful. And then in a twice deleted tweet, Fox's John Roberts said, and I'm quoting here, "The fact that Colin Powell died from a breakthrough COVID infection raises new concerns about how effective vaccines are long term." So he went on to say that he deleted his tweet because people interpreted it as anti-vax. Okay, so that was his defense. Look, that's your original tweet again. Do you want facts? So I will give you some facts. Colin Powell's death doesn't raise new concerns about the effectiveness of vaccines. The fact is, Colin Powell, a soldier to the end, was battling multiple myeloma, which is a cancer of the cells that make antibodies. He also had Parkinson's, which put him at high risk with an immunocompromised system, making him much more susceptible to the virus. Doctors say what Colin Powell's death shows is this: vaccinating everyone is important to protect cancer patients. You get vaccinated for yourself, but you also get vaccinated to protect the vulnerable. People like General Powell.
now, in terms of the vaccination, there are people who are going to say this and they're going to say, see, why get vaccinated? Colin Powell was fully vaccinated and he still died from complications from COVID. Remember, Colin Powell was 84 years old, a very, very high risk group. As we know, no vaccine is 100%. And we have seen a very small number proportionally, but we have seen some so-called breakthrough deaths. What we should be saying in reaction to this is, wow, it is way more common to die when you're not vaccinated at any age. I should get vaccinated. You look at public hospitalization data. We just got some recent data from the UK, which is why I mention it. 84% of hospitalizations in the UK were unvaccinated. Only half of 1% of COVID deaths in the UK were fully vaccinated. And so while this does happen statistically, and it just so happens that Colin Powell is now one of those in that group, you are overwhelmingly protected from hospitalization and from death if you get vaccinated. So the message should be, wow, it's newsworthy because it is so rare statistically that fully vaccinated people die. This really reinforces the importance of the vaccines.
It appears that Howard Stern has had enough of anti-vaxxers. Turning from his week off, he decided to set his sights on NBA player Kyrie Irving for refusing to get vaccinated. Take a look.
I got to tell you, it's pretty incredible. One of them is that basketball player,
Kyrie Irving.
He's my favorite dude who's like putting his money where his mouth is. You got to say, who's a flat earther too. And you know what it is? He doesn't know anything.
Oh boy.
He just knows, well, I can't figure, his mind works in a very strange way. He's like, I can't figure out gravity. So therefore, it probably doesn't exist. And just because they tell me there's gravity doesn't mean there's gravity. Or he goes, all I know is I go to the beach and like I look out at the ocean and I see it's flat. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't give a fuck what they say.
I know. Oh, but Colin Powell just died from COVID-19 and he was double vaccinated. He also had a blood cancer, and which of course affects your immunity. 0.004% of all vaccinated Americans who contract COVID do so seriously enough to die from complications involving COVID-19. Most of those people, a large majority, happen to be elderly people over the age of 65. I bet a big chunk of them, as a result, had compromised immune systems as part of their medical history. And so people, again, understand vaccinated people are not dying en masse from COVID-19. And by the way, they're also not dying as a result of the vaccine either. Not only that, but they're not injecting microchips into your body. Trust me, do you think a corporation is going to, or the government, is going to waste as much money, even if the technology were available to microchip people through vaccines? Do you think that they would waste that money on your dumbass? Like living out there in like rural Paducah, right? And you're just out there in your town of 500 people that the government is going to be like, I want to know where Bob Smith is. And by the way, they talk about, oh, natural immunity, natural immunity. Yeah, natural immunity is good. The problem with natural immunity is that you have to get COVID first in order to achieve it.
I'll tell you what, though. I don't know who runs the Brooklyn Nets, but I wish they were running the country. I love this. I love it. Basically saying, listen, douchebag, you got to do what is right. That's it. We got people here. We got teammates. We got to protect, blah, 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 blah.
I don't think I could have put it better. Yeah, you're being a douchebag. Yeah, you're not doing what's right. So guess what? We're going to do what we can to pressure you by making it as annoying as possible to, for you to go around and infect people, right? And not get vaccinated. Understand that we can, I'm against holding people down and sticking them with a vaccine, sticking them with a needle. I think that's terrible. I think that's wrong. That's an actual violation of your human rights, right? But mandates saying, well, you can either do this or you can't participate in this fun thing or go into this certain building. I think that is fair. And so, yes, it may be annoying, but that's kind of the point. Kind of the point. And so, I'm sorry, but I think these mandates are the only way to try to put this COVID shit behind us.
So, Colin Powell died of COVID complications, severely immunocompromised, multiple myeloma, Parkinson's, and vaccinated, 84 years old. That's what we know. Fox News and others doing their sort of soft anti-vax type stuff. but Tucker Carlson really going fully in on it. As Media Matters reports, Tucker Carlson claims Colin Powell's death proves, quote, "you've been lied to about vaccine effectiveness. You've been lied to." Now, of course, a vaccinated death in an 84-year-old immunocompromised individual doesn't disprove anything about vaccines, doesn't indicate anybody has lied. People lie all the time about all sorts of things. Colin Powell dying is not proof. Colin Powell dying is not proof that anybody in particular is lying. So let's take a look at this video clip. Here is Tucker Carlson. Let's just get right into it, because we have to start there to understand what the point is that's being made here.
A lot has changed in the years since, and that's one of the reasons that Colin Powell's death tonight is so poignant. Like almost everyone his age, Colin Powell was fully vaccinated against COVID. And yet, according to his family and doctors, Colin Powell died of COVID. Of course, that fact does not make his death any less sad, nor is it unusual. Many thousands of vaccinated Americans have died of COVID. Former CDC Director Robert.
So first of all, understand, when we talk about the data, thousands of Americans dying of COVID out of 700,000+ deaths, and overwhelmingly the deaths are the unvaccinated. If you don't understand that data, Tucker's comment is extraordinarily confusing. And a lot of the people, Tucker does that confused face during his show. Many of his audience members have that same face. They're just as confused.
Redfield announced just today that about 40% of all recent COVID deaths in the state of Maryland, for example, are among those who've had both shots.
Now, that's another deceptive thing. Imagine a 100% vaccinated country. In a 100% vaccinated country, 100% of deaths would be among vaccinated people. Why is Maryland important? Maryland is highly vaccinated. So you have to understand that's a mathematical reality as well. And there's a specific reason why Tucker talks about Maryland.
So what does that tell you exactly? Well, it tells you you've been lied to. Vaccines may be highly useful for some people, but across a population, they do not solve COVID.
Now, that's two different things. First of all, you've been lied to. Well, what's the lie that you've been told? Number two, vaccines are useful at every population at reducing risk of death. You might have one population with a higher risk and one population with a lower risk. At all populations, you have a lower risk of death when vaccinated.
That's not speculation. It is an observable fact.
That's not true.
People who've been fully vaccinated can still get the virus.
True.
They can still transmit the virus to others.
True.
And they can still die from COVID.
At dramatically lower rates.
Colin Powell is hardly the only example of that. So the question is, why are they telling us otherwise? And the answer is simple. They're telling us that to divide us from each other.
That is completely untrue. I mean, this is, you have to understand the motive here for Tucker, who's almost certainly fully vaccinated, etc. And by the way, works for Fox News, which has one of the strictest vaccine mandates we've heard about for any large corporation. The whole point here is get people afraid, get people angry, afraid and angry. And at the end of the broadcast, Tucker Carlson casually mentions, oh, okay, I didn't mention that Colin Powell was suffering from a number of health problems, almost like an aside. He talked about Powell being fully vaccinated, didn't mention the health conditions, just kind of drops it in at the very end of the show.
Yeah, apparently. Dr. Jerry, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. St. Luke's Hospital in Pennsylvania. Pleasure. Appreciate it. So at the beginning of the show, we told you about Colin Powell. We left out that Colin Powell was suffering from a number of different health problems.
Oh.
But of course, that's the point. The point of vaccinating the vulnerable is so people with other underlying health problems won't die of COVID. But unfortunately, that didn't work in the case of General Powell, and it didn't work for many thousands of other Americans. And of course, that's the point we're making in the first place.
Yeah. And what's funny is he's acting like this is an important point that nobody else is making. No one ever said the vaccines are 100% effective. And when you talk about population level statistics and you see the death rate among the unvaccinated versus the death rate among the vaccinated, the one story of Colin Powell, although Tucker is making a lot out of it, although Fox News and others are making a lot out of it, is not actually instructive in any way. It doesn't prove anybody lied. It doesn't prove that vaccines don't work. It doesn't prove any of it. But Tucker's audience is primed to accept this stuff hook, line, and sinker.